Let's create a custom block entity. Alright, we find ourselves back in IntelliJ once more, and in this tutorial we're going to be adding a custom block entity, or for those of you who don't quite know what that is basically a custom furnace, so to speak. So this is actually quite a bit more of an advanced topic in this case. So what I basically want to say is that, number one, as of course with all of the things that we've been doing so far, you know, a lot of Java knowledge here is definitely required. Now, everything will be available to you in the description below, of course, in a GitHub repository, as well as the gist as well. Now, there are quite a few things that I will copy over. I will try to do it, you know, piecemeal. So I'm basically going to try to do it method by method rather than just the entire class. Now, we're going to copy over one entire class because that's just sort of a boilerplate class that we have to use one way or the other, and then the rest we're going to basically see. So the plan here is that we're going to make our gym infusing station block right here. Instead of just being a normal block, we're going to of course make this now a block entity. Now, how do we do this? Well, we can start at a few places. First of all, we're just going to make a new package in the block package, and we're going to call this the entity package. And then inside of there, we're going to make a new Java class, and this is going to be an interface, which is going to be called the implemented inventory. This is just going to help us a little bit in terms of basically implementing some stuff. So I will copy the entirety of this over. Now, once again, this is available to you in the description below and the GitHub repository or the gist as well. Let's just see, there should be no errors when we copy this over. So you can see it's just a cited inventory, basically, you know, already implemented. This has been done by Jews, but it is under the public domain license. So just keep that in mind. You can basically use it. You don't even have to give the author credit, but you know, I think that this is the right thing to do. And we will need this later, or actually right now, when we actually make the entity. So in the entity package, in the block package, we're going to right click new Java class, and this is the gem infusing block entity. Now, a block entity in this case is actually made up of 3 different parts. The block entity class, or you can even say 4 different parts. The block entity class, the block class, we're going to have a screen handler class, as well as a screen itself. So those are 4 classes that, you know, make up an entire block entity, and this is why I'm saying, you know, it can be quite complicated to basically look at this entire thing, but we'll get through this, I am very sure of it. So this is going to extend the block entity class right here, and it's also going to implement both the named screen handler factory as well as the implemented inventory that we've just created. Let's hover over this and implement methods. This is going to implement the get display name, the create menu method, as well as the get items method. And then we hover over this again, create constructor matching super, and now we should be pretty much fine, all things considered. The first thing we want to do is remove the first parameter here from the constructor and just leave this, you know, empty over here. Just leave this as an error, that's going to be fine. And we are then going to return something proper here for the get items, and that is going to be a new private final, and that is a defaulted list of item stack, in this case called inventory, there you go, and this is equal to a defaulted list dot of, and we're just going to make this size 3, and item stack dot empty is the default value of this in this case. Why is that? Why would that be the case? Oh, because it's not copy of, it's actually of size. There you go, and that should work. No worries at all. So now we basically created an inventory in this block entity. So this would be the same idea when you have a furnace open, right? It also has 3 different slots. So this is the number of slots that you have inside of this inventory, inside of this block entity. And we can actually return this right here. So it should just be this.inventory, and that should be fine. The display name, we're just going to make this a literal in this case. The display name right here is just going to be text.literal, and we're just going to say this is the gem infusing station. If you want to make this proper, of course, you should make this a translatable text component in this case, or a translatable text, and that would be better. Now, I'm also going to make a deliberate error right here because we've not yet created the screen handler, because there's quite a few more steps that we actually have to go through before we do this. And I basically want a deliberate error right here so that I can remember to actually add this here. Because if it's just null, then it's no error, and that can sometimes lead to me, for someone forgetting this. And because it is so complex, and because there are so many steps that we have to go through, it's best to make errors in places where you still have to add stuff later. I highly recommend doing that. So that is currently the place where we want to leave the block entity and want to make a new class in the entity package again, and that is the mod block entities class. And here, of course, we are going to register our entity. So this is going to be a public static block entity type of type gem infusing block entity. This is, of course, the underscore gem infusing, gem underscore infusing underscore station. And then we're just going to leave it. And then we're going to have a public static void register block entities method. And inside of there, we're going to actually assign this field. So we're going to say equal to registry, making sure that we choose net Minecraft util registry. Very important that we choose the correct registry class. Please make sure of that. I'm going to say registry dot block entity type, comma, a new identifier. No, absolutely not. A new identifier, though. Yeah, there you go. For tutorial mod.mod ID, I'm going to call this the gem underscore infusing underscore station. And then after the first parentheses, comma, and then a fabric block entity type builder, there you go, dot create, passing in gem infusing station, gem infusing block entity colon new, and then right immediately afterwards, comma, sorry, there you go, comma, mod blocks dot gem infusing station, after the first parentheses, dot build, passing in a null into the build, and there we go. That should be all that we need to do here. So you can see this can be quite complicated. Like I've said already, everything is available to you in the description below for download. And we can basically see we're making a new block entity over here. And in this case, we're actually we're sort of combining the block entity and saying, hey, this is the block that, belongs to the block entity. Now let's immediately call this just so that we don't forget this. So this should be mod block entities dot register block entities. And that is pretty much this class done. We don't need to take a look at that at all anymore. And we can also fix the first mistake over here, or the first error, let's say, and that is the mod block entities.gem infusing station, passing that in here. This is why we didn't need the first parameter. If you still have the first parameter here, then it will actually throw an error right here. That is one of the things. So it should be an error right here. It's like something about, the factory does not match the signing or some crazy thing like that. So keep that in mind that that your block entities only need the position as well as the state as its parameters here. Right, now let's move on to the actual block itself. So if you already have this block made from last time, that's great. If you don't, then you can just make a new block. Now it's going to extend something else, and that is going to be the block with entity class, and it's also going to implement the block entity provider. This one right here from the net Minecraft block package. Let's implement methods. That is the create block entity method. And I believe that should be it. Yeah, that's actually all that we need. We're going to override another method in just a moment. But for now, this is extremely important. So please pay attention over here. Let me just do the following. Let me just add a little bit of a comment over here just so that we have this. So everything here is basically block entity stuff, right? So this was all stuff for, just the custom block shape. And now we're going to do all of the block entity stuff. And now the first thing here is extremely important. That is the get render type method. You have to override this and you have to return the following. You have to return block render type dot model. This is extremely important. If you don't do this, then your block is going to be invisible. So if your block is invisible, you have not overwritten this correctly. Keep that in mind. We're also immediately going to just copy over some methods. That is the onState replaced method. Let's see. No errors present. That's great. So what does this do? Well, basically, it's just going to spawn all of the items that are inside of this inventory, right? So inside of the block entity itself, it's just going to spawn them into the world. So this is basically, if we destroy this block, all of the inventory is going to spill out. This is very important if you want that to happen. The next method is the onUse method. That is the right-click method. And once again, there should be no errors present. We're basically making a new screen handler, and we're just saying, hey, just open the screen. What this simply does is when you actually right-click the block itself, it's going to say, hey, this is a block entity. Let's create the screen handler that this block entity, sort of belongs to. That is the general idea, and that is what happens here. Now here, we just want to make a new gem infusing station or gem infusing block entity, passing in the position and the state. So that's also going to be fine. And then last but not least, we also want to override the get ticker method. This is basically needed so that we have a tick method inside of the block entity class, which, well, basically gets called every tick, and we can then do all sorts of crazy things in there. You're going to see in just a moment, we're basically going to have progress, and it's going to increase, and, we're going to have an animation of an arrow that's going down, and all of that craziness is going to be very, very interesting. So in here, what we basically want is a check type call, and we're going to pass in the type. This is just from the right here from the parameter, mod block entities.gem infusing station, and then the gem infusing station block entity ::tick. Now this method currently doesn't exist, so we're gonna have an error here. But what we can do is we can just hover over it, create a tick method, and we're gonna create it in the gem infusing block entity. And it should create it with all of the different parameters that we need. Now this E we can actually change. Let's get rid of this for the moment. And we can replace the E with the gem infusing station, not block actually, gem infusing block entity. Very important. And we're going to call this the entity as well. That's going to be fine. Now, if we go back to the block, this should be okay. So you can see, as long as the tick method has the correct parameters, then it should be fine. And that is pretty much the block done. As you can see, all of the stuff, under the block entity is the stuff that we need specifically when you extend the block with entity, as well as implementing the block entity provider interface over here. So we can close this as well and continue with the block entity class. So now we're getting into some very, very interesting things, because now we're actually getting, I would say, a little more advanced here. So first of all, what we actually want is a few more fields over here, and that's going to be these ones. I'm just going to copy them over once again. So this is a property delegate. So this property delegate is very interesting. We also have 4 integers. And why do we need a property delegate, and what is this even? As a highest level overview, a property delegate is pretty much sort of a way of synchronizing data through the client and the server, and it's sort of like done automatically for us. So this is going to be done so that the progress, the max progress, the fuel time, and the max fuel time over here are going to be synchronized for the screen, because the screen itself, right, is just going to be the image that is displayed, and that is client only. And of course, we have to sort of synchronize that when you open the client, right? You can have a progress bar and all of that. So this all needs to be synchronized. And that is basically done via a property delegate. We're going to see this in a moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually assign this inside of the gem infusing block entity constructor here. And I'm going to once again just copy this over. You can see we're basically making a new property delegate. You have to override the get and the set method. And here we're just basically saying, okay, the get, is just the progress, the max progress, the fuel time, and the max fuel time. In this case, actually, we don't even need fuel. That's actually a very good point in this case. We only need the progress because the fuel, it's going to be, we're going to basically take a look at that in a little bit. But the fuel overall is going to be some sort of either energy or fluids, but that is something that's going to be in a later tutorial. Right now, we're just going to implement the general, gist of this, the general idea, and that should pretty much be fine. So these are the things that we need up here, and we can then continue along and add 2 more methods. And that is the write NBT method, this one right here. Just start writing that, and then also the read NBT method. Now, those are also going to be interesting because, of course, what happens is that if we, leave the world, if we close the world, we want our inventory and our progress and all of that to be saved, right? So this, of course, has to be saved. Therefore, we actually need to add this. So what we do in the write one is we do inventories.write NBT. We're passing in the NBT and we're passing in the inventory. So this should save the inventory. Now, of course, we also need to read the inventory, right? So we want to say inventories.read NBT, passing in the NBT again, and passing in the inventory again. Now, I have this set up like this. I am unsure if you have to call the read over here before the super or not, but I have found that this works. It probably doesn't matter, but just in case, we're going to do it. And then we also want to put in the integer over here. So this is going to be the NBT put int, and that is the gem underscore infusing underscore station dot progress. And what do we want to save under this? Well, we want to save the progress variable. There you go. And we, of course, also want to read this out. So we're just going to say progress equal nbt.getInt, and then just taking the same key over here. It's going to be a little bit easier. Just pasting it in. There you go. And that should be the write NBT and the read NBT methods. Very interesting indeed. And then we can actually continue with the tick method. Now I'm going to sort of try to, explain this as I go along. So first of all, we're going to do if world.isClient. I just want you to basically return. So I am not 100% sure. I have found this to be the thing that you want to do while doing, doing stuff with my own mod. This may or may not be the thing that you actually want to do. I am unsure about it, but for the time being, this is what I found to work. So keep that in mind as well. This might not be the ultimate actual thing that you want to do. However, I found this to work. Okay, then what do we want to do? Well, I'm just going to, start writing stuff in and, with methods that don't exist yet, but that's okay. So we're going to say, hey, has a recipe. So that's the entity that we have a recipe inside of it, right? So if that is the case, then we want to say entity.progress ++, right? We want to increase the progress. We also, this is extremely important, we want to mark dirty. We have to pass in the block position and the state. So this basically reloads this particular, I'm not sure if it reloads the chunk, but it definitely reloads this block position itself. We have to do this when you change it so that it synchronizes once again server and client. And then we want to say, hey, if the progress of the block entity is bigger or equal than to the entity.max progress, right? So if we have achieved the max progress that we want to achieve, then we want to craft the item, right? Once again, passing in the entity. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, if there is no recipe, right, what we want to do, of course, is we want to reset the progress. So that's just what I'm going to do. So we'll just say reset progress. So we're going to call the reset progress method on the entity. And we're also going to mark dirty here. This is still very important. Otherwise, the progress is not properly saved, basically, or not properly synchronized. I believe that in the craft item method, we're actually resetting the progress as well. Now, you could do it inside of the method, or you could do it like inline here, but that's going to be fine. So hopefully, the general idea here makes sense, right? We're basically just going through. So every tick, every 20th of a second, we're saying, hey, do we have a recipe in this entity? If we do, then we're just going to increase the progress. We're going to mark dirty. And then if the progress is bigger or equal to the max progress, then we're going to craft the item. And now let's implement each of these methods. So let's hover over the actual recipe here. We're going to, no, this is not the right one, by the way. We're going to want to do more actions. And we want to make a method. Create method has recipe right here. So this is a Boolean method, of course, and we're first of all going to implement it without a custom recipe type, and then in the next tutorial we're going to be adding a recipe type as well, but luckily it's going to be fairly, straightforward on how this is going to be implemented, and so that's actually going to be a very easy thing to do. So let's start with, first of all, the first few lines, and that is going to be a simple inventory. Now this we're going to need regardless of whether or not we have a custom recipe or not. And then we want to say, okay, we just want to basically see, do we have a raw gem in first slot, right? That's what we basically want to check. And we're just going to do this by doing entity.getStack. So we can get stack from any type of slot that we have inside of this block entity. Now this is actually slot 1. I will show the GUI in a moment, and then this makes way more sense because we're going to have a slot 0 that's going to be for, any type of basically fluid stuff, and then we're going to have a slot 1 that's going to be at the top where you actually put in the ingredient, and then we're going to have a slot 2, and that's going to be the output slot. That's going to be the actual get item here, get item, and if that is mod items.raw tanzanite, then I'm going to be fine, and then we'll return a few things. The first one is the has raw gem in first slot, right? So basically making sure, hey, do we even have a particular recipe, in this case, quote unquote recipe, inside of the slot? Yes. And then we want to make sure two things. The first thing we want to make sure is that can insert amount into output slot. So what does that mean, right? So basically what I want to do is I want to make a method that checks whether or not we can even insert, X amount of a new item into the output slot of this particular inventory. And we also want to make sure can insert item into output slot. This is inventory, and then the item itself is going to be mod items.tanzanite. So those are two methods that we have to create as well, but that's no worries at all. Let's hover over this create method, and let's hover over this create method. Now I actually think that what I want to do is I want to also add a count here. Let's just do 1 in this case, and let's just do an int count. So that should be fine. And then here we want to return and say inventory.getStack. This is 2 because 2 is our output slot. We're going to say get max count. So we want to say, hey, what is the max count of this particular item? And if this is bigger than the inventory.getStack2.getCount, nope, get count actually. So now I want the actual count plus count. Then we're going to be fine. So what does this make sense? At the first glance, you might say, wait, this doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's think about this. Can I insert this amount, right, this new amount into this? Basically, this has to be true while I can insert it, and that's why it might be a wrong way around, more or less, right? So it could be more let's say, intuitive to do it the other way around and then negate it all, but this is going to be fine. Rest assured, I've tried this, and this should be the way that this should work. And then also can insert item into output slot. What does that mean? Well, we basically want to make sure that the item itself is either empty or it is the same item, because otherwise we're just going to overwrite it. So we're going to get the actual item from the actual inventory itself, and we're going to say, hey, is this the same as the, Tanzanite is okay, but how about, like, we call this output? That's probably a little bit better. And then we're just going to say, hey, is this output.getItem, right? Or as item, that's fine. And actually, no, we should just be able to do output, or is the inventory.getStack to is empty. Nope, not is damageable, but is empty. There you go. That's exactly right. So either it's the same item or it is empty. And if that is the case, then we have a recipe and we can increase the progress. And at some point, then we can craft the item. So let's hover over this, create the method here as well, the craft item method. And how does this one look? Well, we actually are going to need the same thing over here. So we're going to need the same, inventory. That's going to be the same thing. And then we're just going to say, once again, if has recipe. This is definitely not needed. It's just sort of like a sanity check. Once again, just in case it actually is we have something. And now we want to, remove stuff. So we want to say entity.remove stack of, inside here. And we want to remove one of them, right? So count one. So basically, we're going to remove one raw gem, if that is inside of the slot 1, fair. And then we also, of course want to add to slot 2, which is our output slot. So we want to say set stack in slot 2, and we're going to make a new item stack in this case, mod items.tanzanite. And here we just want to say entity.getStack into get count, and then +1. So the reason I'm doing it like this is because if the stack is empty, right, you could also say, well, why aren't we just setting the stack to itself, right, entity stack.get2? Well, if it's empty, then, we don't have anything in there. That's why I'm creating a new stack with the same count, just added by 1, and we're going to make it out of the Tanzanite item in this case. And now we just need the reset progress method. Now I can actually just add this. Let's just add this here. Now this is a non-static method in this case, but you could, in theory, also make this static. It doesn't really make any difference. And that is actually the block entity and all of the sort of brain of the operation done, right? The tick method really is the brain of the block entity method in this case, and that should pretty much be fine, and it should pretty much work. Now, we can go on to adding the screen as well as the screen handler. That's going to happen in a custom package. So we're going to make a new package in the tutorial mod class, right-click new package called screen. And that will then also resolve the last error that we have here. So here we need 3 classes. The gem infusing screen. We're going to need the gem infusing screen handler. And then last but not least, we also need the mod screen handlers class as well. This is, of course, where we register the screen handler. Let's start with the screen handler. Yeah, that's going to be okay. This extends the screen handler class right here. Let's hover over this, implement methods, the transfer slot method, as well as the can use method. And then we're going to hover over this again, create constructor matching super. Now, this is actually completely wrong. We first of all want to get rid of the first parameter here. And then here we want to actually get the following. We want to make a player inventory. That's called inventory. We also want to make a inventory. That's going to be called inventory. And then we also want the property delegate. That's going to be called delegate. And that's going to be fine. Now, this is going to be okay. We're just going to keep it like this. However, we will make this public. And then we'll make another public gem infusing screen handler. And that's going to be the int sync ID. So that's going to be the same parameter as well as the player inventory, And we're going to call the other constructor through this. We're just going to say this, passing in the sync ID and the inventory. And then we're going to make a new simple inventory. Nope, absolutely not. A simple inventory, though. There you go, of size 3. Now, very important. This size right here has to be the same size as we are supplying right here in the gem or in the block entity, right? So this is the size of our inventory. This has to be the same size. Keep that in mind. And then we're also going to make a new array property delegate of size 2. This size right here has to be the same size as in the property delegate right here. Of course, the size here being how many different, basically how many different integers are we tracking in this case, right? Of course, 2, right? We have 1, 2. Should be fairly self-explanatory. Nothing too crazy going on here. And that should be all that we need in this case. Let's end this with a semicolon, absolutely. And then the type, we're going to fix that in a moment. Oh, that's actually not right. This is the player inventory. There you go. And then this error should also go away. And then let's take a look. The transfer slot method. Okay, the transfer slot method is very interesting. What I basically always do there is I'm just going to copy this over, and I basically then never want to take a look at it again, because the transfer slot method basically is used for shift clicking into this inventory, and I hate it. Yes, we could go through this. I can explain everything. It's absolutely not necessary. It's just a convoluted mess, and I don't like it. I don't like it. Now, we will need two fields here. As you can see, the inventory field does not exist yet, so we're going to need a inventory field as well as a property delegate field. Now, those are, of course, all assigned right here. First of all, we want to say check size, and we want to say inventory 3, so that the inventory of the block entity is actually, expected size 3. We also want to say then this.inventory is equal to the inventory parameter. And we can say the same thing. We can say inventory.onOpen, and then passing in the player inventory.player. There you go. That's exactly what I want to do. And then we can also say this.property delegate, or property delegate equals to delegate. There you go. Just make this format correctly, and there we go. Now, we're not quite done yet. We will need to add a few more things in here, but first of all, let's figure out the other method here. So the canUse method, actually fairly straightforward. It's just going to be this.inventory.canPlayerUse, and then passing in the player. Now, we're going to need two helper methods. I'm just going to copy over. That is the add player inventory as well as the add player hotbar. And those methods are interesting because, well, basically, those are always going to be the same, right? The inventory usually of the player is always going to be 3 rows, and then it's going to have 9 slots and all of that craziness. So this is basically just two helper methods so that we don't have to put this into the constructor, and that's exactly what we want to add right here. So we want to say add the inventory first, passing in the player inventory. There you go. And then as the second one, we want to call the player hotbar, passing in the player inventory as well. Now, something in between here is actually going to go, and that is going to be the slots. So we basically wanted to add our custom slots in here because the screen handler itself is responsible for handling the screen, right? So this is handling the inventory and all of that jazz. So we basically want to add the slots. So we're going to say this.add slots, or add slot with a new slot over here. Passing in the inventory, then the index. So the index just starts at 0 and then counts up. And then we need an X and a Y position. I'm going to show the X and a Y position in just a moment and where I got those from. It actually is fairly straightforward. And then, well, like I said, the index just counts up. This is going to be 86 and 15, and this is 86 and 60. Perfect. That's going to be fine. And then last but not least, we also want to call the add properties over here and passing in the delegate. So that is pretty much everything done except for this type. We're going to fix that in just a moment. And yeah, that pretty much sums up this class. So like I said, the screen handler, the add properties here just makes sure that the property delegates that we've added right here, right? So the progress and the max progress is actually synchronized through client and server. Now, we can actually add the last two methods as well. I think those should work. Yeah, the isCrafting method and the getScaleProgress method. Now, those two in this case are, more or less done manually, or, more or less just done by myself. And we're basically just checking, hey, are we getting any progress? Then we are crafting. And then we're also saying, hey, get the scaled progress, because we want the progress, regardless of what the progress is, we want a sort of, well, basically a scale progress so that the arrow itself, displays depending on how far along the progress we are. Right, now let's go to the mod screen handlers to fix the last mistake here. This is going to be the public static screen handler. This is actually screen handler type, very important, of type gem infusing screen handler. And this is the gem underscore infusing underscore screen underscore handler. There you go. And this is once again a public static void register all screen handlers. And this will do the following. It will just do gem infusing station screen handler equals to a new screen handler type, and then just passing in the gem infusing screen handler new. That's all that we need to do, and that should pretty much be it. Now we of course want to call this right here as well, mod screen handlers dot register all screen handlers. There you go. And that should pretty much be that. Now we can change the type over here to mod screen handlers dot gem infusing screen handler, and no more errors should be present right here. And then we can go into the block entity itself and fix this error as well. We can just say a new gem infusing screen handler, pass in the sync ID, pass in the inventory from the player, pass in this, and then pass in this.property delegate. And there we go. No more errors present here as well. And the last thing we have to do is just add the screen. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So let's take a look at the screen class. The screen class extends the handled screens. Nope, that's not right at all. It's actually the handled screen. That's very important. That would be a very bad mistake. Of type gem infusing screen handler. We're going to hover over this, implement methods. That is the draw background method, absolutely. And then we'll hover over this again, create constructor matching super. Now what we want is we want an identifier for the texture. Just going to copy this over. It's under textures, GUI, or GUI as I like to call it, gem infusing station GUI. This is under textures and then a new folder or new directory called GUI. And I'm going to copy over the GUI and then I will also explain what the frig is going on with that. So let's just copy this over and I'm going to show you. So this is the GUI at the moment. So you can see, you know, roughly speaking, what is going on. This is slot 0, this is slot 1, this is slot 2. Now we also have a tank and we also have an energy display, which are going to be, you know, implemented in a later tutorial. But I also already wanted basically the full inventory here available. And yeah, we're going to see this in a moment as well. Now, the coordinates, if we think back to our screen handler, right, 12, 15, are basically the top left coordinates of our GUI, basically, right? So the GUI itself is literally just the image, right? The screen itself is just this image, basically. It's nothing else. And yeah. And the rest is done in the screen handler. So the slots, right, where you can actually put items into, that's all done right here. That's all done with the slots. That should pretty much be that. Now let me just quickly, you know, import or, you know, copy over the rest here. So we have init. So I don't think we even need this, but this basically centers the title, if I'm not mistaken. Then the get draw background method, we're just going to add the boilerplate code that's going to be added always, right? So this is going to be added always. And we also want to override the render method. This is also extremely important. Otherwise, you won't have the sort of darkening effect around the texture, and it's actually going to look very, very strange. Now, let's then copy over my last method over here, and that's going to be very interesting. And we're going to immediately call this right here. This is the render progress arrow method, passing in the matrices, passing in X and Y. So what is going on right here? So basically, if we're crafting, right? So this is basically where we have this one right here with the proper delegate of, you know, I mean, not size 0, but of index 0 is bigger than 0. So if we have any type of progress, right? Basically meaning if we have any type of recipe inside of our block entity, then we are, okay, we are now crafting. If that is the case, then we're going to start drawing a texture. And now you're going to be like, where do all those crazy numbers come from? This is insanely confusing. First of all, I'm going to agree with you on this. However, this is actually not as crazy. Number one, try out a bunch of stuff and figure this out. Number two, I'm going to explain. So the best thing is to have the GUI open as well and think about this. Okay, so we have an X and a Y here. Now, what is 105? Well, 105 is actually, should be, and I'm hoping that it is because I've not been thinking about this for a little bit, but I think it should be right here. So that's 105x. Okay, interesting. So what is 33y then? Well, that's just down 33. And then we're here. Oh, so this is where we draw this texture. But then the question is, but what texture do we draw? Well, this is determined by the U and the V. We're just moving into the X direction 76, you know, pixels. And then we're right here. It's like, oh, okay, but how do we know like what to draw, right? It's like, oh, well, it is of width 8. Okay, so then it's width 8. So then we know the width 8, right? But how do we know the height? Well, this is the height. It's the scale progress. So based on how much progress it is, we're drawing more or less of this arrow. So that is the general idea. If this was a little confusing to you, I highly recommend just playing around with this a little bit. It is very confusing in the beginning, but once you get the hang of it and understand what the numbers mean, then it is totally, like, you will understand it. X and Y, by the way, is the top left corner of the GUI. That's the general idea. So that should be pretty much the top left corner of the GUI, while then you just do an offset. And with that, we should have everything done. I am cautiously optimistic, but I'm pretty sure that this should be all that we need to do, and it should work. We actually do need to still reference the handler. So the screen, you can see it's currently gray, so we're not doing anything with the screen, and that is going to be done in the tutorial mod client. So let's just go in here, and we're just going to say this is the handled screens. This time it is screens. Dot register passing in mod screen handlers. Dot gem infusing screen handler. And then just the gem infusing screen. Gem infusing screen colon new. No errors should be present. And then it should actually work. Now, wouldn't this be freaking awesome if it worked first try? It very much would. You know, if there's any mistake, we can take a look at that as well. But I'm pretty sure that it should work. So let's just go into the game and see if it works. All right, we found it in Minecraft, and let's just right-click the block, and there we go. The GUI works, and we can see if we hover over stuff, it also seems to work pretty well. So let's get a raw tanzanite over here. Let's just get raw tanzanite. And if I put it into slot 1, right? So this is slot 0, slot 1, slot 2. First of all, let's get rid of the weather over here. Clear for forever. Let's just go there. You go. And then let's see. So if we put a raw tanzanite in here, the arrow should appear. And once the arrow is done, we should have a, well, something else here. Oh, this is looking pretty good. And there we go, a tanzanite. And I can just, well, I mean, let's do this. There you go. I can just put this in here, and it should just keep creating tanzanite. So that's actually very interesting. So you can see we actually are not. So there's a few things that are very interesting here. So first of all, we're not adding the 64th one. That's actually very interesting. And also, once we are, once we have one done, we're not resetting the progress. But that's, of course, something that's very, very easy to fix. That should be done in the craft item method, right? So this is why you want to, roughly speaking, have this, kind of nicely separated. So right here, once we actually do this, we want to say entity.reset progress, and that should reset the progress. And then I guess what happens is that the count over here, we do want to do this instead of plus the count. I'm not sure about this though. I'm not quite sure about this. This might work, this might not work, but that should pretty much be the fixes. And that is actually all that we need to do. Like I said, the block entities are a very, very, complex thing. They are not as easy as you might think. And there's a lot of, well, interchanging or interlocking parts, basically, right? With a block entity, and then you have a screen, and then you have a screen handler, and all of that craziness. So what I can just say is take a look at the GitHub repository, take a look at the gist, copy over the classes, make sure that this particular, thing works, and then you can go from there. Now, what I actually highly recommend is also that you check out the next tutorial that comes after this, because there we're actually going to add a custom recipe type, which is going to make it much more expandable. Because let's say now I'm going to say, okay, now we can add a tanzanite, but let's add like 5 more different things, and just make sure that this works. That's ridiculous. So we basically want to add a custom recipe type so that we can literally just make a custom JSON file, just like the shape one here, and we can just make the JSON files, and it's just going to work this out basically. That's also going to be very, very interesting indeed. So I highly recommend you check this out. Otherwise, I hope you found this useful and you learned something new. I would really appreciate a like if you did. And otherwise, I will see you in the next tutorial. So, yeah.